Hey there, Buckeye Nation. Welcome to another exciting edition of the Silver Bullets podcast on the Ozone Radio Network. I'm your host, Shannon Sommers, contributor at Hazen Cannon, director of the Ozone Radio Network, and producer of Across the Field with Tony Gerdeman. Today we're going to be talking about the Ohio State men's basketball program and do a little recap of the last couple of games. And we're going to be doing a look forward to the Big Ten and how we think the Buckeyes are going to shake out and everything. So today I have Eric at the BBC with us to discuss some men's basketball. Eric, how are we doing today?
Doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Doing great. Eric just came off vacation. Got to take a vacation during Christmas, I guess.
Hey, had to head back to Columbus. I mean, can you hate me for that?
Well, no, never. And we have from the Sons of Schmidt, because they don't do any men's basketball, we had to steal Mike Citro. Mike, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for including me.
Oh, of course. I mean, I feel like I'm in honored territory here for anybody who knows anything about Buckeye podcasting. I got some of the OGs of the Buckeye podcasting world, so just gonna sit back and relax and let the professionals take over today.
That just means we're old, not that we're good.
I mean, they say us old folks, experience is better, right?
In principle, I suppose.
Yeah. Until you wake up in the morning, you're like, where is that pain from? All right, let's, Mike, we haven't had you on the show yet. And I know you've tried to talk some basketball with Brandon and Mike. What are your thoughts right now for the Buckeyes? And I mean, we knew that they weren't probably going to beat North Carolina, and they turn around and they put a nice little whooping on Miami. So, I mean, what are your thoughts so far? And, recap the last two games yourself.
Well, I have to say, overall, I'm pleasantly surprised with what Chris Holtmann has been able to do with this program in just a short time. This is not, by any stretch of the imagination, the most talented Big Ten basketball team we've ever seen. It's not on the level that it needs to be on, and that that it will hopefully eventually be on in the near future. But what I'm seeing is a team that does a lot of little things well, a team that that tries hard, that never seems to be going through the motions, and that's something that we have seen from the last few years under Thad Matta. I don't really blame Thad for that so much, but maybe not getting some of the recruits to buy in the way that he expected, and I think that this group of kids is playing hard. I think they're listening to the coaching that they're getting. They seem to have a plan and a purpose when they're on the court. And, I think that they'll go as far as their effort will take them, and that won't be as far as we'd like it to be. That won't be as far as what other talented teams will reach. But I think this is a team it's an interesting transition team to watch. And I'm not one of those guys that tunes out in down years. I'm not one of those guys that sort of pushes this to the back burner and doesn't pay attention because they're not good and that kind of thing. It's I look at just like the football team, I look at it as a journey, and there are ups and downs, and the downs you can learn a lot from too. And I think in some ways the high points of down years are actually a lot more fun than the high points of years when you expect a lot. So, I've already seen some things out of this team that have been very impressive. There's still too many turnovers. They still miss way too many 3-pointers. But I'm very optimistic about where this program's headed. The North Carolina game it always looked like it was going to be a blowout coming into that game. I think that they surprisingly held their ground and stayed in the game for a while. And really, they only had one bad section of the game that kind of put them behind the 8 ball, and they couldn't really afford to have that against a team of that caliber. So, proud of the effort, and I think that they did about as well as could be expected in that game. And then, the game you just mentioned against Miami was, those are always dangerous games, those in-state games, because a lot of these kids played against each other in high school. They don't have any fear. The smaller school wants to beat Ohio State so badly, and that kind of makes them elevate their game. And I think we saw that a little bit with His name escapes me. I think it's Bam Bowman, the fat guy who kept hitting 3-pointers.
Yeah, that's the guy.
Yeah, and that kind of that's the kind of thing that you see in games like that, and it can cost the team. But I think I like the way that Ohio State responded to Miami's run. I think that they got a little cocky there when they made the big run and got the big lead, and then C.J. Jackson threw the ball, then tried the highlight no look pass to nobody, and got pulled from the game, and then Dockich made a couple of turnovers on the next couple of possessions and allowed Miami to get some momentum. But I like the way that Ohio State responded and won going away. So a lot of positives, I think, so far.
Yeah, I definitely agree that this team is, a lot better than what we thought going into the season. We knew what a lot of their weaknesses were going to be. And when you looked at North Carolina being a top 5 team, just winning a national championship last year and having a front court that they have, you knew that it was going to be a tough road to hoe, as they say. Eric, what are your thoughts on the North Carolina game in Miami?
Yeah, so I think Mike hit a lot of the points really well, but I want to emphasize one thing that Roy Williams said after the game. I'm not a big Roy Williams fan myself, but he commented that it was amazing to him how well the team has bought into Coach Holtman's philosophy since June, right? It's been about 6 months, a little bit more than 6 months. And the team is responding to Holtman better than Roy Williams thought they would. It's essentially the essence of the quote. And that says a lot, right? That was a little bit of, hey, this guy's doing a really good job from a top level coach. There's some promising things here from that. And we saw some of that. Yeah, okay, the Buckeyes didn't play great against North Carolina. They kept it together for the first 10, 15 minutes. They were holding on and keeping pace, and then they let it slip away right at the end of the first half. And then after that, it was just keeping pace the rest of the game, right? They would get up to within 9 and then fall back to 16 and back and forth. We never could catch up. But, that's just a measure of how good North Carolina is. They're coming off a national championship, right? There was a limit to what we were going to be able to do against them. And I think we showed a lot of heart, a lot of fight in that game, which is very important to build off of, especially since this team is not a well-balanced, not a well-balanced team. It's not the kind of team that you would dream of putting together. We've got some pieces parts. We're going to paste them together and see how they play on the court, right? And they're playing pretty good basketball. But against Miami of Ohio, I agree. We got a little lazy. We got a little complacent. They were putting up a fight early in the game. We got on the big run, and as Mike said, we did some goofy things that we shouldn't have done. Right? There were some mental breakdowns, which happens with a team that's still developing its culture. But they did a good job of fighting hard and making sure to claim the victory, even if it wasn't a pretty victory in any sense of the term. But it's something that they can still look back and say, okay, these are things that you just can't do, period. Now let's move on to Big Ten play and try to not do those things again.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There's a lot of positives to take out of it. I think maybe I think Wolford really screwed the Buckeyes with their victory over North Carolina because it kind of woke the sleeping giant, and they weren't doing their sleepwalking because, it's the holidays and stuff like that. It would have been nice to see Ohio State be able to pull off the victory in that, but we knew going in that we just wanted to see them battle and be competitive, and in some sense they showed, resiliency in some battles. So, all in all, it's going to be looking good for this program going forward. Now, speaking going forward, we're about to enter the Big Ten play, and I think our first matchup is against Michigan State. So,
Iowa.
Got Iowa. Yeah.
January 4th, Iowa.
I think I'm just trying to blank and erase anything that says Iowa in my head.
Hey, don't look past them again. I don't care what sport it is.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't think that they would have looked past them, but I think maybe just after, talking a little football here for a sec, but after seeing the bowl games and the way that the Big Ten's dominating everybody, that maybe Penn State and Ohio State game really more of a heavyweight fight than what people let on to be, and Ohio State was just lethargic the next week and recovering, basically. But
ESPN's taught me that winning all your bowl games doesn't mean anything.
And what's weird on that, we could do a whole nother show on that. That narrative is just completely changed. It's so weird how they just they're anti.
I don't mean to get us off topic.
Yeah, but their anti-Ohio State bias is just insane. And not just Ohio State, but just the Big Ten. Let's see how many Big Ten schools we can sue. How many Big Ten or how many SEC schools have they sued during investigations and such? None.
Well, it's. I don't know what you expect from the partner of the SEC network.
Well, it goes to show that when the Big Ten network decided to start when the Big Ten decided to start their own network, and ESPN told them that they're going to fall flat on their face and all this, that they are very bitter that losing the Big Ten has cost them a lot of money. They went out and said, "Hey, look, Texas is going to be great for our brand, but no." The SEC is going to be great for our program. You only had football. Your basketball and everything else pretty much is terrible, and you have baseball, but okay. So, it is what it is. You make your bed and you sleep in it. That's why you keep laying people off.
Ow.
So with that being said, even though we're going to have to unfortunately see Big Ten games on ESPN, what are you guys' thoughts? I'll go with Eric first. And as far as what are your thoughts as the teams to beat, the top tier teams, and we'll start off with that first.
Okay, so I was thinking about this earlier today, and clearly Michigan State and Purdue are going to be the two hardest outs this year. Michigan State, of course, is ranked number 2, and Purdue is ranked number 14. Michigan State's on a 12-game winning streak. So we're very lucky that we only have to play them once this year. We get them at home, and we get them in 2 weeks. So, it's early in Big Ten play. We get to have a shot at them. And frankly, Michigan State commits an awful lot of turnovers. So there's an opportunity there, if we play a good game, to possibly steal a win in the one chance we get to play them. Maybe. Purdue might be a little bit tougher. They're looking like a pretty solid team. They don't always play great, but they generally play a pretty good game. So I have a hard time believing that we're going to absolutely just knock off the top of the conference because they're just playing great basketball. But some other teams to watch out for. Maryland is a pretty good team. They've had some struggles recently, but I have a hard time believing Turgeon isn't going to have them ready to go in the conference. And then, I guess we don't have to fear Indiana this year, so I'm not going to mention them. But the conference in general, even though it seems a little down this year, it has always been very tough, and especially when you have a very young center, right? So the interior play in the Big Ten has always been the biggest thing. And right now, our interior play is good, but it's not great. And I think we're going to see it exposed a lot in the next couple of weeks, especially against the Michigan States, especially against the Purdues. So there's a lot to a lot of learning we're going to get out of this team, and a lot of learning about how Holtman is going to handle these things. It was nice to see us take care of Wisconsin and Michigan, but we'll have to see how much further this goes. But I wanted to ask you guys a question, because we're exactly halfway through the season. We played 15. We've got 16 to go. We're 11-4. If we go 11-5 in the Big Ten, so we're 22-9 overall, how would you feel about this team?
Ecstatic. I don't.
Kidding.
11-5 in the Big Ten. I don't see it happening. I think this is a team that I really think the ceiling for this team is, around the 5th or 6th place in the conference. Maybe they can sneak into the, get a one of the last bids into the tournament. Maybe if all the things come together. I think depth is going to be a problem for this team as the grind of the conference schedule goes on, I think the depth is going to show. I'm not seeing enough good things out of guys like Kyle Young and Andre Wesson. I'm just not sure what's going to happen in games where Caleb Wesson is in foul trouble, and that's going to happen. That's going to happen, and especially on the road in the Big Ten, and in games where C.J. Jackson is in foul trouble. I think those are games that are going to be problematic, and same with KBD, Keita Bates-Diop. I think those are the three guys that if they don't. If they're not on the court, it's a problem, and if they're on the court too much, it's going to be a problem later in games and later in the season. So, I would be ecstatic with that record.
Yeah, I definitely would be too, just based on the simple fact that how many years we were, enjoying 20-game win seasons and everything, and to get back to that, and yeah, it might be down a little bit, like you're saying with the Big Ten, but it's just the fact that Holtman comes in June and we're lacking guards. We don't have, like Michael said, the depth and everything like that. I think it would be a really good testament to Holtman and what he's building here.
Yeah, exactly. So now my question for you, I don't know if either one of you are looking at the schedule, but where do you see more than 5 losses occurring in this schedule?
Well, I definitely think that they're going to lose games that maybe they even shouldn't lose, but even at home against Michigan State, I don't see that as a win. At Iowa is going to be difficult. So these next 2 games are going to be tough. Maryland's going to be tough. I have a lot of respect for Minnesota's program, and I like what Penn State's doing, and I even like what Nebraska's doing. So, they're definitely going to lose at Purdue. They could lose any and all of the road games. Although I'm very encouraged by the fact that they went to the Kohl Center and won. I just don't think that Wisconsin is at the level that we're used to. But I think that there's certainly a chance for 5+ losses when you look at these upcoming games at Iowa, Michigan State, Maryland, and really, if you lose all 3 of those games, it could snowball. I mean, you could the team's morale could suffer, and I mean, even at Rutgers isn't going to be easy. The game after that, and then at Northwestern, I mean, it's a pretty rough schedule to open the second, I guess the meat of the Big Ten season, since we've already had a couple Big Ten games, and then Minnesota. So I mean, right off the bat, years past, you'd look at the schedule and go, "Wow, we have a chance to win all those games." Now you look at this team this year and you say, there's a chance they could lose all of those games. I don't think they will, but there's certainly, it wouldn't surprise me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't count out teams like Northwestern, and Rutgers is actually kind of improved and stuff like that. The one thing I do like about the Minnesota game is that it's going to be on a neutral court for Super Saturday in New York. Does it help Ohio State? I don't know, but at least it's better than having to, if they were at Minnesota, where it'd be kind of crazy. And I mean, I'm any kind of Pitino coach team, and I don't care if it's the dad, the son, the brother, the nephew, the whoever, I'm definitely not liking that program just based on the last name. But I mean, we still have to play Michigan one last time, like 3 weeks to February 18th at Michigan. And you know that they're going to be a little bit chip on the shoulder of not being able to beat Ohio State. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this season, and the fight in this team shakes out. I mean, is that, like Michael said, the depth going to be the big issue? Even though Thad Matta was sitting in his living room shaking his head listening to this right now, saying you only need 6 to 7 players.
But injuries could play a role too, because you have
definitely.
I mean, if Keita Bates-Diop got hurt, I mean, forget it. Mm-hmm. This team's not going to win much. And
injuries have already played a role, right? Because Micah Potter's been out for a while, and we've seen the effect that's had. that's been hurting this team the last couple of games.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a team that can afford a key injury, a Tate or a KBD to miss significant time, a Wesson, certainly not Jackson, because there's really no guard depth at all.
Right.
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, just how great a shape are they actually in for the Big Ten fight? You know, that's the conditioning. He wasn't here, Holman wasn't here long enough in order to set up a strength and conditioning program to be able to, get these guys like a whole year, whatever, kind of like, the way the Ohio State football program is with Pantonio or I forget his name off the top of my head. But I mean, just little things like that might rear their ugly head. So, I mean, there's a lot of question marks going into it, but it's going to be enjoyable just based on the simple fact that right now Ohio State does have a product that's worth watching. And I mean, Michael hit it on the head that, I'm a Cleveland fan, so I've endured so many bad basketball, football, baseball, and still watch. So I'll be darned if, even if Ohio State's not doing good, I'm not going to be watching.
Exactly. Another thing we didn't talk about is Musa Jallow and how he's going to hold up as a guy who really should be a high school senior. He got a reclassification and will his frame and his stamina hold up through the grind of a college season?
Exactly.
So far, it's not looking so good.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, he's struggling.
He started out. Yeah, he's struggling now. He started out really strong. He looked great through the first couple of games, and he started to fade out over the last few. So I think we already have the answer to that question.
Exactly. One thing I was encouraged by the Miami game is we saw Cam Williams look like Cam Williams again. That was really nice to see because he looked comfortable. He looked. You could tell when he went up. He was confident the shot was going to fall, and when his shot is right, man, it's pretty.
Was it the App State game or the Citadel game where he had like 17 points? So I mean, him and Kate's Diop both had 17 points in that game, I think. So I mean, it's just he's starting to. It seems like he's starting to finally come around, and maybe it's starting to click. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he tweeted something about his trip home kind of got him rejuvenated. So maybe he just maybe he just needed to get his mind right.
Could be. Sometimes it's all it's needed.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very talented shooter. I mean, when he's on, he's as good as any shooter we've seen in the last 10 years. But we've just seen the bad Cam Williams a lot in the last couple of years too. So if Cam can shoot like he did against Miami, it's a huge boost for this team.
Right. I wonder how much of it is he's been taken on the pressure of he's a senior. He needs to step up for this team. Right. I wonder how much of the pressure of that was getting to him. And, he went home, he thought about it for a while, realized that, hey, we've got Tate, Keita Bates-Diop, and they're doing a good job of being go-to scorers. I can just play my game. And that's been enough. Right. And, he didn't need to score a lot. He went 3 for 3 3-pointers. Then that was good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about how sometimes he makes those boneheaded plays where he drives down and you have a fast break, and instead of either trying to kick it to somebody that's open or wait until to set up the offense or something, takes a freaking shot with nobody underneath the basket and just sits there and drives you absolutely nuts.
Yeah, unless it goes in, then it's awesome.
Yeah.
There's nothing like a fast break three because it's just it's got to just be demoralizing for the other team. But I really enjoyed seeing that a couple of times against Miami, and certainly hit some big shots in that game. Not a lot of shots, but some big ones. That's really what you want from your 3-point shooter. Your designated 2-guard is to hit the open shots. I mean, he doesn't have to score a lot, but when you kick it out to him and he's wide open, those have to go down because that's the only reason he's on the floor.
That's exactly right. And that's going to be even more important in the Big Ten when we're struggling against some of those bigger interior guys. We're going to have open men on the 3-point line. We got to hit it.
Yeah, and you're gonna need that against zone defenses too. So,
yep.
So, do you guys have any sleeper picks for the Big Ten this year to keep an eye on besides like the Michigan State, the Minnesota, and the Purdue?
Penn State.
Yeah, I think Penn State can make some noise. I really like how that program's come along. It's just been kind of quietly there. They've lost a lot of close games over the last few years, and it really doesn't take much once you're at that level to start winning those close games. So I do like Penn State as a sleeper.
Yeah, if they might not win the Big Ten, but they might win the Big Ten tournament. They got a good team, and they can win games. As Michael says, they can start winning the close ones. So I think they got the talent to be able to maybe make a run in that tournament.
Now, if looking at Ohio State, say they take a loss to Minnesota, Purdue, and Michigan State, and like you're talking about like two other teams for the Big Ten, whoever they are, come tournament time, do you think they would have a good enough resume, and hypothetically with 22 wins in the season or whatever, like we were discussing, do you think they would have a shot at getting into the tournament with no key wins?
They don't have any bad losses though. And I think that might help them. I think if they can finish 5th or 6th in the Big Ten, I think they get in. But it would be just a matter of did they take down one of the giants in the conference at some point, or at least did they not get blown out? Did they maybe lose by a basket against Michigan State? I think there's a lot of factors involved, but I think when you talk about a conference like the Big Ten, the top 5 teams in this conference should get in, and maybe 6th, even if it's a down year, you should be able to count on at least 5. So I mean, you got to get into that range, and that's going to be the challenge for this team.
Yeah, I agree with that. If they lose 5 games, heck, if they lose 7 games, they'll be a 20-win team in the regular season going into the Big Ten tournament. If they can win a couple of games in the Big Ten tournament, maybe they're an 8 or a 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. Maybe. If they don't have any bad losses but don't have any quality wins, that's probably the best they're going to be able to do. If they can sneak a quality win somewhere, the numbers might be a little different. But at this point, at the beginning of the year, I predicted that they were going to be an NIT team. I think we're sort of riding that bubble line right now, and it's going to depend a lot on how the next couple of games go at Iowa versus Michigan State versus Maryland that will sort of determine what path this team takes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Eric. These first few games are going to be a really good test to see where this team is. And if the team, even if they battle and lose these first couple of games, I think that they'll take enough out of those games to do well against the lesser teams in the conference. If they get beat by double figures repeatedly early, it could get ugly.
Yeah, the culture of the team, the what's the word I'm looking for? The morale of the team is sort of in a fragile state, right? They've built a lot. They've got a lot going for them. If things start going poorly, we might start seeing the lapses back to the games like against Gonzaga and Butler, where we started letting things go. We started getting down on ourselves when things weren't going well. So at least maintaining close, hard-fought games against quality opponents is going to be an important part of maintaining the morale and keeping them fighting hard through the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think we're going to learn a lot about Chris Holtmann, too, in these few games because, is this a coach who really hammers home how vital conference wins are? Is that why Ohio State was able to get a win at Kohl Center and a win over Michigan to start this thing off? I got to be honest, I didn't expect either of those games to be wins. So that was nice to see. If this team is going to elevate for conference games, we should see that pretty quickly off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that.
Yes, that week in December was one of the greatest weeks, and you tie that to the previous week of, with the football, just beating Michigan, then beating Wisconsin in football and basketball, and then turn around and beating Michigan again. It's just, those are like the greatest things for Buckeye fans to enjoy.
Look, any day that I get a win over Wisconsin, I'm happy. Any day that I get 2 wins over Wisconsin, man,
Anytime I see Michigan lose to Ohio State, I am thrilled.
Yeah, I would say those are the two teams I enjoy beating the most. Those two and Penn State.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys were able to read from the Columbus Dispatch. I think it was Enam Jardy. He did a in-depth article about the fall off in recruiting and went through the ledger of, how much money they were spending and how many hours and everything that Thad Matta and the team are spending. And it showed that the last few years is just a significant drop off for Ohio State in recruiting and, hitting the recruiting trail. I mean, I don't know if you guys were able to see any of that or what, but I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on seeing it? I mean, when I looked at this, and I have to wonder in the back of my head with everything that was going on with the Adidas, and we don't know anything about Nike, but just the way that the pay to play basically was going on. I mean, I wonder how much of that, played into it, and maybe Thad Matta was staying away from it, or was it that Thad's back was that bad that he just wasn't going out and recruiting, and he didn't have the other coaching staff helping? I mean, what are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I think that certainly Thad's back issues played a role in that. It's very difficult to travel when you've got a bad back. There's nothing comfortable about flying. There's nothing comfortable about sitting in a car for long periods of time. I'm sure that played a role. I was never comfortable these last several years with the assistant coaches. And that's a big part of recruiting is the assistant coaches getting out on the road and getting things done. And that's part of it. And I also think that I think the sights were set on national recruits unrealistically. I mean, I don't know how many stories I read about how, they were talking about this guy or that guy, and this guy's talking about Duke, North Carolina, and Ohio State might be like 6th or 7th on the list. And you knew those guys weren't coming here. I really think that there's something to be said for a program like Ohio State to identify the guys who realistically are the best possible gets. And you shouldn't be fighting with a Duke and a North Carolina. You should be fighting with the Wisconsins and the Michigans to keep the best Ohio kids in the state at your school. I mean, that's going to be the way that you get things done. I mean, it's national recruiting is great if you can do it, but in basketball, it's very, very difficult to compete with those blue blood schools. Even you're talking about Kentucky and Kansas and those guys, and that's not even getting into whether or not there are shenanigans going on, because Ohio State basketball is not, they're not the Paola team. We're not talking about the Patinos and the Caliparis and those guys. So I think that there's been a problem with recruiting, and I think they set their sights too high on some guys, and I think that's part of it. But I also think that I haven't been impressed with what the assistant coaches have done, and I certainly think that Thad's back is part of the why he wasn't getting out more.
Yeah, I agree with all of those thoughts. I think they were all contributing factors. I imagine that some part of it was also the negative recruiting related to Thad's back, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no negative recruiting in sports.
Oh, of course not. No, there's no way. There's no way the top coaches weren't saying, "Look, you don't want to go to Ohio State. You don't know how much longer Thad Matta is going to be able to play with that back." I heard some negative recruiting about he's going to die soon. I mean, I did want to say that, fighting for the Duke and North Carolina players is fine when you're fighting on the in-state players or fighting for the Indiana players. You might be able to get away with that because they're close to home.
Right.
You're not spending a lot. You've got tie-ins with the coaches there. But yeah, going to California for a guy, going to Florida for a guy in basketball doesn't make any sense. You're going to get a lot more buy-in from the players locally that are going to want to play hard for your team. They may not be the absolute best players in the world, but you can still potentially win national championships with those guys. Look at Butler making it to the national championship game 2 years in a row with guys that wouldn't necessarily have been recruited by Duke, North Carolina, right? So there's definitely a lot to that I agree with. Maybe there was we were getting good for a while, and we set our sights a little bit too high, and that started causing some recruiting misses. And so then we were going for third-tier guys instead of second-tier guys. That's possible. The back issue was certainly an issue. I'm certain that Thad was putting a lot of weight on his assistants to try to get the recruiting done, and assistants probably just weren't getting it done. At the end of the day, I agree that I had a lot of concerns with our assistants for many years. And it's hard to say until we hear more specific details about it. It's just sort of a vague concern, but there were some issues there. I don't know how good our assistants really were overall. So yeah, I think Mike really hit the nail on the head on most of those points.
And if they weren't all-star recruiting assistants, then what were they doing? Because they really weren't developing guys either.
Right.
I mean, how many years did we have no development of our bigs at all? That was a constant source of aggravation for Ohio State basketball fans. And you can't put it all just down to attitude. I mean, you look at some of the guys that had come through there, and you could tell they just didn't even want to play. But other guys really seemed like they wanted to play, and they just weren't getting any development at all. They weren't getting better from their freshman year to their senior year, and it's things like that made me, Thad was a loyal guy, and he would hire a guy and he would keep him around. Maybe wasn't ruthless enough with his evaluations of his assistants the last several years of his tenure at Ohio State. He had some great assistants early in his career at Ohio State, and when they went on and got other head coaching jobs, the replacements just weren't up to that level.
Well, let me add a slightly different take, similar but a little different. With his bad back, there was probably a lot less effort put into developing his assistants, right? Part of the reason why you're an assistant coach is not because you are very good at what you do. You're an assistant coach because you're learning too. And so there was probably some of this, hey, he hired a few guys to be assistants, and then he didn't develop them. He didn't teach them what they needed to know to be able to do their jobs better. And so they stagnated. And so then the players stagnated because the players weren't learning. So, it all sort of flows downhill. And I don't want to sound too negative about Thad Matta, but, love the guy to death, thought he was a great coach. But I think there was a lot to that as well. It takes development on all levels. And if the assistants weren't getting jobs at other programs, if they weren't getting head coaching positions, it's probably because they weren't developing, they weren't learning.
One of the biggest things that I took from skimming through and being able to read the article a little bit was Chris Gent. Here I'm sitting there thinking, when Chris Gent came back, the program's going to get back on track, Mr. Buckeye through and through, and all this stuff. And it looked like he hardly did any kind of recruiting whatsoever. And when you seen Chris Gent with a young LeBron James helping him work on his jump shot, you're thinking that he's going to be able to help the team develop and get better. And I'm bitterly disappointed in Chris Gent, somebody who was one of my favorite Buckeyes of all time.
And it's so weird to hear that he wasn't doing much recruiting at all. I mean, I had a similar feeling about him as you did, Shannon. Oh, Chris Gent is coming back. We had some good years with Chris Gent as an assistant coach. Maybe he can help turn some things around. And then last season, we saw what happened. So it disappoints me greatly to hear that maybe Gent wasn't doing his bit.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing, too, is like you guys were talking about with the national recruiting. I think that kind of sets you up more for you're trying to go for the first, the top tier players. And yeah, sure, I get that. You want that talent to come in. But at the same time, you're going more after a one and done player than you are a kid, like from Columbus or Dayton or, Cleveland area, to where it might take him a few years to develop, but he wants to wear that scarlet and gray and can become like one of them one and done players eventually.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the recruiting the one and done guys. I'm certainly willing to leave that to the Kentuckys of the world. I'd really like to have guys that are going to be around 2-3 years, and I think that Ohio State's that kind of program. I think that's sort of the mentality of the Midwest, the hardworking, a loyalty, that all kind of plays into, I think, the identity of Ohio State. I never really cared for that. I mean, if you can get a D'Angelo Russell every now and then, that's great. But I think that's a guy who you bring in that puts a good team over the top. I don't think it's certain you can't build around that,
Yeah, I agree with you completely, Mike. And actually, so not to bring in some, dirty laundry here, but, LeVar Ball is trying to build a new development league outside of the college game. More power to him. If he can draw all the one and dones to his league, great. Then we don't have to worry about recruiting those players. We don't have to worry about those players coming in. We can have the college basketball that we had 20 years ago, where kids came to the school, they spent 3 or 4 years and, learned to be better players and got an education. I think there's a lot of value to that.
For anybody playing Buckeye podcast bingo, LeVar Ball is a name that we never had on a card, so
don't go looking for it.
That's a name I never thought I'd hear on this show. Yeah, I
As
mean,
they said, dirty laundry, right?
Right. I mean, like Michael said about with Butler, and I think for Ohio State's success, it's going to be, you have to bring in a system, and you have to find the players that you can develop and put into that system, and not bring in players and try to fit a system for those players. I mean, look at the Thad Matta, when everybody said he had a top 5 recruiting team, when the Mitchell, which everybody knew based on his brother being a flip-flopper, that he was going to be a flip-flopper. That's just the way the family was. And just the rest of that class, the way it just all fizzled out. And it just, I don't know. That left a bitter taste in a lot of Buckeye fans' mouth, mine included. And I think that with Holtman, not just is he going to be a good coach, but I think he's going to bring in a good system, and he's going to go after those type of players.
Yeah, you want to see the kids come in that have great character, and I think you're going to see that Holtman bring in kids with terrific character that grew up in the Midwest and respect the program, respect the school, want their family to come see them at games. These are all the things that he's going to be selling, and the things that he's going to be bringing to the program. And oh, by the way, he's a pretty good coach. So, he can take maybe the same level talent as what would be at another school, but get better results out of it. So I think that's really the aim, and that's kind of where Ohio State was for a few years, and then Thad came in, and Thad kind of was a little bit of a rock star early in his career at Ohio State, and had early success, and that kind of again, I think, changed a little bit of the culture of the basketball program. And some of it was for the better, I'll be honest, but some of it, when the glitter faded a little bit, you saw what kind of happened. And I have nothing but respect for that. I think personally, I would put him at the top of Ohio State's all-time coaches. He doesn't have the Natty, but the guy that won the Natty only had to win 2 tournament games to win the Natty. So, and he kind of had, a Havlicek and guys like that. So I think that is as good as anybody we've ever had. A lot of respect for him, but again, when the things started to go south and didn't get corrected, and I agree with a lot of what Eric said about how his health deteriorating may have led to a chain reaction there with not developing coaches and therefore not developing players. I think you just need, in Columbus, you need a strong, smart coach who knows what he's doing, who goes and identifies players that are good for his system, right for his system, and doesn't let the good in-state kids get away. Because I've always believed that you play harder for the school from your backyard than you do, going to California to play for somewhere you've never been.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. It says a lot that Holtman is trying to build this culture of you know, being more than yourself, right? You know, play for your teammates, play for the school, play for the fans, play for, there's this mentality of it's no longer only about you. And I want kids coming out of high school that are going to buy into that kind of system, right? It's not just about you. You can play basketball in a system where there's one star and everyone else is the support cast. You can do that, but that's not where you get great basketball. You get great basketball when you have 5 players working together as a team. That's when you can beat zones. That's when you can beat what the defense wants to do. That's when you can actually play really solid team defense, right? So pulling in some of what I've heard Urban Meyer say about recruiting, it's recruiting the parents. Who are the parents, right? What are they teaching the kids? I see a lot of kids playing basketball that probably didn't have really good support structures at home. And they're probably your one and dones, right? They spent all of their time on the basketball court just learning basketball because they didn't want to go home. Right? I'm generalizing, of course, but there's probably a lot to that. The kids you want are the ones who have strong parental guidance, strong parents who are teaching them right and wrong, teaching them how to be good people, good men. Get them on the court because they're going to be good teammates and they're going to work hard for the team and they're going to win games for the team. And that's what you're looking for. So I think Holtman's going to bring a little bit of that culture into the recruiting. It's not just going to be, oh, this guy's really flashy on the court. It's he's really good on the court, but he's also really good off of it too.
Yeah, I think we see some of that mentality in the way that this year's team is playing already. We've seen, great team defense. We've seen, at times, I thought there were stretches that Miami game where Miami could not get the ball inside the arc at all because of the way that the Buckeyes were playing, and they were playing with length and they were playing in sync with each other. And also, you didn't see a lot of hero ball on the offensive end in the fast breaks. You saw people looking for that extra pass, the unselfish play. And that's unselfish play in basketball is successful basketball.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you guys. I mean, you guys hit a lot of things on the head. It's kind of funny because one of the last podcasts for Silver Bullets for String Team, we had associate head coach Patrick Klein from the women's basketball program on. And one of the questions I asked him was, how do the different programs, like the men's and women's basketball program, the football team, and like lacrosse and everybody else, how do they all work together within the program? And he, said that Gene Smith puts it together to where there's meetings with the assistant coaches all together, and there's meetings with the head coaches, and you have like the leadership classes and these soul for soul trips and everything. And just, you want a player that's wanting to build themselves and get better as a whole, not just on the basketball court. I mean, you want that, like Eric was saying, the character and everything like that. And those are the type of people you want to bring in. I mean, you see it with the football, what Urban Meyer has done, bringing in those kind of players, the family and the structure and everything that's going on. And you see the off the field issues. I mean, before Urban got here with even Tressel, and Tressel was besides the whole incident with the tattoo gate trying to play, cover, not really cover, but help his players out. But I mean, it just, you've seen with him, he's a little bit more laxed and kind of like dismiss things a little bit. Whereas it seems that you don't really have these issues right now with Urban, just based on the cut of players that he's bringing in.
Right. Part of that is probably also that on an Urban team, if you screw up off the field, you're not seeing the field. And if you don't see the field, you're not going to be able to develop quite as well as some of your competition, right? There's such a level of competition amongst the players to get playing time that no one wants to screw it up, right? Because if you fall behind, someone else is definitely going to jump up and take that spot, and they're going to be a 3-year starter that you're never going to get to see the field, and that's it, right? So the margin of error, I think, on an Urban team is a lot smaller, and I think that sort of helps with some of that. But you're absolutely right. I think Urban Meyer recruiting good kids from the right families makes a big difference. And I think Holtman is going to do a very similar thing in basketball. And I think we're going to start to see similar off-field or off-court results from it too. That we're gonna start seeing better, more of the go to a children's hospital and spend time with those kinds of doing those kinds of acts of service, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let's be fair. These are kids. You're still going to have problems. You're still going to have people. Mm-hmm. You're still going to have kids doing dumb things because, we were kids. We did dumb things. Kids do dumb things.
Yeah.
It's part of learning. It's part of growing. And we're still going to see that regardless of who the coach is. It's just a numbers game. You bring in 100 football players. Some of them are going to get in trouble at some point.
Right.
And now we live in the social media era, so that once some rumors out there, then person's instantly guilty and they're the worst person that's ever lived. So that's just par for the course, and we're never gonna get away from that. But yeah, by and large, I think that the types of players that you going after the one and dones, as we've mentioned, is a little more problematic than it is going after the team first character guys, because those different goals. I mean, just different life goals. Everybody that steps on a basketball court wants to get to the NBA, but some guys are willing to take shortcuts, and other guys are willing to put in the work. And you want the guys that are willing to put in the work.
Right.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with the players that are the ones and dones, and they're looking for their future, and they might have had, not a great home life, and the only thing that they're thinking about is the money. I mean, those players are fine, and they do what they want to do and do what they need to do. But it's just, if you want to build the character and build the program, and I think, like we've all said, that Holtman is doing that, you want a different type of player, and you want the stay-at-homes, the guys that are sitting there thinking, all right, look, I do want to go and play in the NBA, but let's look at this realistically. I could have an injury, and I need to have something to fall back on, and I don't want to be a player that I signed a multi-million-dollar contract, but yet I'm broke already. And I just got hurt yesterday, and I just signed my contract last week.
Yeah, I don't mean to come off as denigrating one and dones at all. It's a valid choice. I mean, everybody has different priorities in life. It's just like Denzel Ward. I mean, I don't blame him for doing what he did in protecting him, his health by not playing in the bowl game. I mean, that's a valid choice. I'm not in his position. I can't say what I would do in that position. I can say what I think I would do, but I can't say for sure, because I've never been in a position where somebody's telling me you're a top 10 pick and you're going to get paid millions and millions of dollars, and you could screw it up on any one play in this game. So I don't blame him for what he did. I don't blame one and dones for doing what they do. They're doing what they think is best for them. Mm-hmm. And that's what everybody should do. Everybody should do what they think is in their best interest. So no problem with it. I just think it makes a better basketball team to not have those guys, or at least not count on those guys, not make that the model, make it, the exception rather than the rule.
And let me go back and just comment as well. I made the comment about one and dones and how their family life probably is. Greg Oden, Mike Conley, Daquan Cook, they're all three of them were one and dones, but they came from great families with great support structures. So, when I said I was generalizing, I meant it. I was very much generalizing that kind of culture. But
you're right. I think you mentioned Denzel Ward, and I'm 100% with you. He had every right to do what he did. I don't fault him for that. I'm not in his shoes. None of us are in his shoes. The only issue I have with it, and apparently the team actually had precautions, taken as far as practice time. I mean, if you sit down with the coaches and you're going to sit there and say, hey, look, I'm on the fence about playing for the bowl game. I'm afraid that I might get hurt, and I'm looking out for this NFL contract. You know what? If I'm the coaching staff, look, Denzel, we are behind you 110%. You gave us everything you had. We support you. But go ahead and go focus on your NFL draft. And I know it was like a game time decision for him and everything, but you can use our facilities and everything. Go focus on that. And to me, I wouldn't have, I don't know. I just think if sitting on the outside, not knowing every particular, that if you're practicing and you're taking practice time away from other players in order to develop them, to get them in that, next man up mentality, I think that in itself hurts the program. But not knowing exactly what happened behind the scenes, that's just an assumption.
Yeah, my understanding is that they did give a lot of practice time to other DBs, with that in mind. And honestly, how much practice does Denzel Ward need at that point?
Right.
I don't think that practice time was an issue. For me, if I'm the kid making that decision, I wouldn't want to distract from my teammates, and I would want that one last game with my teammates, but that's just the way that I'm wired. And of course, I'm wired in a different social way because I'm not a talented, athlete who, is poised to make tens of millions of dollars.
Right.
I have no frame of reference the other way. If I had been socialized differently, if I had grown up as an athlete, knowing that this was a possibility all along and I was set to make those tens of million dollars, I would have a lot of different things to think about. But, my understanding is that, they didn't spend a lot of time giving him reps at the cost of other players. So, and that he was transparent and upfront right after the Big Ten championship game about it. So I don't really have a problem with any of the way that it was handled. From a not knowing about it till game day perspective, it's easy as a fan to get a little bit upset about it because you didn't know. But, we don't really need to know everything that they know.
Well, yeah, and there were rumors going around and stuff beforehand. So I just, like you said, I'm wired differently also. And especially after the situations, since we're older and experience gives you a lot of different life lessons, that I would be myself as far as in that situation, play with, my teammates one last time. And also, you don't know, in all honesty, if you're training for the combine and whatnot, you can get hurt in training. You can get hurt at the combine. It's rare, but it's also rare if you're in shape to be getting hurt in a bowl game and have a devastating injury like his name escapes me, like the Notre Dame player, the linebacker,
Smith, the linebacker, or Jake Butt from Michigan.
Right.
There are examples, and of course, that speaks to what your thought process is, and again, and I know we're getting off the subject that we're here to talk about here, but if I'm an NFL GM and I'm sitting there on draft day with two guys that are equally rated, am I taking the guy who made the business decision, or am I taking the team first guy that played? That's, I think, a thing that a lot of these kids don't take into perspective, or at least maybe they'd say, well, whatever, I fall a spot or two, it's still worth not taking the risk. They have to make that decision for themselves. But if I'm the GM, I'm taking the kid that played because I want the team first mentality.
That, and when I sit there and look and say, all right, this player said that he practiced, and we all know that you can get injured in practice. Is he given 110% in practice? Why would I want to bring him on my team if he's, afraid of getting hurt in college and his draft stock, and he's not giving it his all? Is he going to give him his all when he's playing for us if we draft him? Or is he going to wait for his contract to be up to go and play for the Patriots or, the Packers or somebody? I'm not saying that's his mind frame. I'm just saying, like you said, as far as being a GM side of it, that's the way I would look at it.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that the players maybe don't take quite into as much of account as, you're not, or maybe they're willing to say, okay, well, I might lose a couple million, but I'm not going to lose tens of millions. So, I understand where they're coming from. And I don't hold any ill will towards Denzel Ward. I think the people that tweeted mean things at him are idiots and should probably, everybody should delete their account, but especially those people.
But those are the same ones that probably tweeted mean things to JT and are thankful that he's gone, which, by the way, JT's my quarterback still. But, and just
for recruits that don't pick Ohio State, anybody that's going to tweet at those idiots. But I enjoyed Denzel Ward's career.
Yep.
I think if he played against USC, they probably pick off Darnold a couple more times. But it's probably not as close a game. But he made his decision. I respect it. And if the coaches respect it as well, who are we to sit in judgment? So, I enjoy the players when they're here, and when they're not players for Ohio State anymore, I wish them well.
Yes, once a Buckeye, always a Buckeye.
Mm-hmm.
Just to put my perspective in, I also agree with you guys that look, when Denzel Ward's announcement came out, or when we started hearing about it, my reaction was, "It's been fun having you play for us. Let's go beat USC." All right, if they choose not to play, that is their choice. Mm-hmm. Don't go tweeting at them. Mm-hmm. Don't get upset about it. It's their choice, right?
Right. You wanting them to play is a selfish perspective, as Kerry Combs said.
Well, and that's fine, right? I would love to have seen Denzel Ward play that final game, but mm-hmm. at the end of the day, he gets to decide what he does with his body and his time. Okay, you're not a part of the team anymore. All I said, and I tweeted this, I hope that he had told the coaches in advance, and I think we heard that he did, mm-hmm. that this was a possibility so that we could prepare and the team could adjust for that. And that's all I cared about. So at the end of the day, whether they play for the Buckeyes or not is their choice. And I feel the same way about recruiting too, incidentally, right? If a player chooses not to play for the Buckeyes, best of luck to you. Good luck. Have fun.
Yeah.
Basketball, football, doesn't matter.
Exactly. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, those guys, those that flipped it on, it's not like the coaching staff didn't have a pretty good idea of who might flip. Emory Jones, for example.
But was he really a flip though?
If they don't commit, if they sign somewhere else, they were never really a Buckeye. And if they were never really a Buckeye, do you want them on your team?
Exactly. And that's one of those ones where you look at Micah Parsons and I can't remember his darn name for the life of me, the giant guy that chose Clemson. I mean, you want to choose Clemson, that's fine. But also you have to remember all those people that are being negative and, saying, I hope you blah, 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 whatever, just being jerks. You have to sit there and think to yourself, all right, when he put that tweet out thinking or saying that Haskins should have been a quarterback and not JT, if he were to choose Ohio State, how much flack would he get as soon as he stepped in that locker room?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay to have an opinion, but I mean, he wasn't a part of that team. He came in and made a visit. He's no better, at judging who should be quarterbacking the team than any fan at that point. It doesn't really, that didn't resonate for me at all. It's ridiculous. And the JT debate will probably never go away, but like all great artists, JT will be appreciated long after he's gone.
That's certainly true. And yeah, I agree with you guys. The whole, Dwayne Haskins should be starting instead of JT, that was a big nothing burger. I don't care what some recruit thinks about who is quarterbacking our team. It's just totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
All right. Did you guys, going back to basketball or even some football, do you guys have anything else you would like to discuss?
As we record this, the day before the big, New Year's bowls and everything, I would just like to say it's been a fun, perfect bowl season for the Big Ten. I'm not a conference first guy like the SEC folks are, but I think it's been fun to watch the Big Ten kind of mop up the rest of the country after getting shut out of the playoff. And I say this is a perfect bowl season because it doesn't matter what Michigan does. If they lose, it's a perfect bowl season for the Big Ten. And if they win, it's still a perfect bowl season.
I was going to say, and with that, go Gamecocks.
I could get behind that either way. Whatever happens to Michigan, I don't care.
I don't care if we're like 0-7 right now in bowl games, and Michigan's our only chance for any kind of redemption. Go Gamecocks.
Yeah. Wisconsin's win clinched a perfect bowl season for the Big Ten, regardless of what Michigan does.
Exactly
right. So I will admit I'm not going to watch the playoffs. No interest at all. I didn't watch the BCS game when they had two SEC teams in. I'm not going to watch the playoff that has two SEC teams in. And it's nothing to do with the SEC and everything to do with the fact we were trying to avoid exactly this. So until they put in a 10-team conference champions only playoff, I'm only going to be marginally interested. So,
yeah, I think when you look at, and I can't sit there and as far as putting a conference champion in, I agree in some respect, but at the same time, a lot of us, and I mean, I don't know what your guys' opinions were last year for Ohio State getting in over Penn State, but just a lot of us Buckeye fans then were saying, hey, we deserve it because, you know, we had this, we had that. I mean, granted, Ohio State had the better strength of schedule than anybody else in the country, I think, at the time. So, I mean, that played a lot into it. And when you look at Alabama not having the strength of schedule and just sitting there saying, hey, we're going to go with the one-loss team over a two-loss team, and your impression that the Big Ten is down because the last 2 years in the playoffs, they both got shut out, you have to sit there and think to yourself, all right, these guys just beat everybody in their bowl games. I mean, I think that if you just went by scores alone and just what everybody scored in their game, not just, you know, just Purdue would have won each bowl game as far as against the Pac-12. So I mean, that just kind of mind-boggling right there that Purdue outscored all Pac-12 teams.
Oh, geez. I hadn't heard that.
I don't know. It's to me the argument last year was that Ohio State had the best resume, and I think that's a solid reasoning, and I think that's the same reason you'd pick Ohio State this year over Alabama.
Yeah, I agree with that. And
it should be about the resume. Now, if it's not going to be about the resume, there's no sense in scheduling in Oklahoma in the non-conference schedule. There's just none at all.
No, get Mercers. I mean, more Mercers because that's it. They're not taking, you know, they're just taking wins, and they're not taking quality of wins. And you look at the end of the day, Ohio State beat 4 top 10 teams.
Look, see, my point on this is let's not debate Alabama, Ohio State, USC for that last slot. What about UCF? Yeah, okay, they didn't play anyone all season, but they went undefeated. Give them a shot, right?
Yeah.
If you can't decide between Alabama and Ohio State who should be in that 4th slot, put UCF in. Let them have a shot against Clemson. God forbid they win it, right? They might not, but you know, what really bugs me about the playoff is they are busy trying to get the 3 best games that they possibly can, rather than trying to determine a national champion, right? They have to pick one of the two. They either have to focus on deciding who the national champion is, or they have to decide who's going to give them the best games, right? The games that people are most interested in watching. It's one or the other. It can't be both, right? Sometimes you'll get lucky and you can get both, but this year was an example of that. You're not going to get both. So what's the goal here? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I mean that's the real thing, isn't it? Is the criteria used, and I just don't like the way they moved the goalpost. I mean, the week before the Big Ten championship game, they were on TV and said, well, we'd have to really lean heavily toward the team that wins the conference.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can't move the goalpost because Wisconsin didn't win the conference. All of a sudden Alabama's their pick.
It's razor thin. It's razor thin between 4 and whatever it is, and blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden, the following week, 2 of the top 4 or 2 of the top 10 teams play each other, and one of them sitting at home, and the one sitting at home somehow markedly got better.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Alabama lost their way into the top 4, and that is unprecedented.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really a dangerous thing when it's, you know, when you lose your way into the Final Four. And granted, we're still early in this process. We've only been around for a few years, but the moving of the goalpost is a problem. I understand Ohio State didn't get excluded for the loss to Oklahoma. They got excluded for the loss to Iowa. But if they don't have Oklahoma on their schedule, they're a Big Ten champion with 1 loss against an Alabama with 1 loss that didn't win its division. So it's an easy. Yeah, they get in with the Iowa loss only. They get in with the Oklahoma loss only. They don't get in with the combination of them because Alabama in a down SEC year had only one loss and didn't even play some of the better teams in the SEC, or at least in the SEC East.
And I think a lot of fans, and just maybe afterwards the Wisconsin game, the Ohio State should have blew them open. I think Wisconsin was one of the most what's the word I'm looking for here? Disrespected teams in the nation.
Very underrated defense on that team,
and especially
extremely underrated defense,
and especially
extremely physical team.
Yes, and especially when you look at the simple fact that they lost Jack Sitchie before the season even started, and then I think it was the first week they lost another linebacker. So I mean, the injuries that they had, and yet they still had a top 5, top 10 defense in the nation. So I mean, it boggles my mind that how the perception of, well, Wisconsin's not that good. And I think it was Buckeye Notes, was it Jerry Irwin? He put out a tweet the other day saying, what was it? Ohio State is the only team, and I forget how long, that had a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense in the same year in the nation. But yet we're going to sit there and say, oh, Ohio State's not that good. Please.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all on the same page about Ohio State. I don't think that's any secret. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Wisconsin showed how good they are, and that they've been sort of underrated all year and overlooked, and you can say disrespected. I don't even think it's that, because I don't think people even think about them. It's just that they're overlooked. They're up there in the north of the wall, as they say in Game of Thrones, and they didn't play a lot of great teams all year, but they took care of business, and they were very strong. And I mean, look at them. They won their bowl game in a road game. They played Miami in their home stadium.
Yeah.
And Miami was a pretty good team too, but I think Taylor had at least triple the yards rushing against Miami than he had against Ohio State.
Yeah. And how are you ranked number 4 as a undefeated Power 5 team, but yet when other the SEC teams are undefeated, they're 1 or 2? It just, that really boggled my mind to sit there and say, oh, well, Clemson with 1 loss to Syracuse is going to be higher ranked than Wisconsin, who's undefeated as a Power 5 team. I don't care if your schedule is weak or not. It's just Kevin McGuire, who we've had on our show, and is a good friend of the show. He tweeted something out about Purdue's turnaround is better than Ohio State's turnaround when Urban came and went undefeated. I think we are not appreciating an undefeated Power 5 team as much as we should be anymore.
Yeah. I mean, if you would take Wisconsin over Alabama, I'd have no problem with that.
Exactly.
Yeah, look, Wisconsin, and this is just the final point I'm going to make, they came within 1 touchdown of being entirely undefeated this year.
Yep.
Right.
And actually, that's probably, they came a couple of yards away from being undefeated this year. So they were definitely a good team. They got disrespected.
Yeah. And one thing, I know we need to wrap up, but I do want to say as somebody who lives in Orlando, no on UCF. No.
No?
Yeah. No. Anybody that gave up, I mean, anybody that watched them against South Florida, what an entertaining game that was. But South Florida missed 2 field goals and and had over 600 yards of offense on that team. UCF didn't play anybody. They certainly didn't play a defense at all this year. I'm really looking forward to the game against Auburn, because Auburn's got a real defense. But I don't know. They could beat Auburn, because I don't think Auburn's got that great of an offense.
Yeah. So my point is, if you go undefeated in Division I football, you should have the opportunity to play for it. And hey, if you're not good enough, you're going to lose. All right.
I agree with that.
Too bad.
Okay. 18 playoff.
10-team conference champions.
Well, all right. Well,
sorry, Notre Dame, join a conference.
This episode of Everything Underneath the Sun for the Buckeyes. All right.
We had to talk about the Silver Bullets a little, because it's called Silver Bullet Podcast.
You have to. And so, before we wrap it up, Eric, where can people find you at?
You can find me on Twitter at EricTBBC.
What about you, Mr. Citro?
On Twitter, I am at Mike36Fan, MIKE36FAN.
Remember, if you enjoyed this episode of the Silver Bullets podcast on the Ozone Radio Network, dubbed the Old Man Roundtable, you can subscribe to our show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Google Play, and probably more. I'm not sure. I just don't remember. I mean, we're trying to be like, they're everywhere. But listen to our other shows that we have on the Ozone Radio Network, like the Sons of Schmidt with Mr. Citro, Mr. Zimmerman, and Mr. Meals.
Oh, yeah, I'm on that too.
And then we have the Across the Field with Tony Gerdeman. So looking forward to a great, or not great, but just an entertaining, something that we didn't think was going to happen for the Buckeye basketball team this year. And looking forward to a entertaining Big Ten basketball slate. And want to thank Michael for joining us. And I think we might have to do some more shows like this where we just talk during the summer and stuff like that. So that being said, go Bucks.
Go Bucks.
Go Bucks.